There are two things I really want to talk about today. Number one is a proverb that I have heard a few times over the last month, which is man plans, God laughs, or man sets goals and God laughs. Man thinks and God laughs actually is the original translation of that, I believe. And then the second is a frame or just like a 3-step framework that I've heard or seen in every time someone asks God for anything without the Bible, which is faith, boldness, and humility. And normally when I make YouTube videos, if you haven't been to this channel before, by the way, my name is Paul. I'm a Christian business owner, and I try to online or on YouTube make content where Christianity and the Bible really intersects with business, or how to take biblical principles and intertwine them in the business that you might be running. If you have been watching our videos, then you know normally they're not these raw sit downs. It's something new that we're trying. It's something that I'm trying to get better at, a skill that I'm trying to develop. And also this week I'm slammed with work, so we don't have time for the normal sit down stuff. The reason I'm saying this is because normally I have more structured ideas or frames on how I want to approach videos. Today is going to be a little more of a rough, I know I want to talk about this, and how do I bring it together? It's actually really simple to bring each point into business, but I think what my brain wants to do, or what my heart is telling me to do, is find a way, the concept that I would normally think about that I'm going to talk about in front of camera today and kind of voice this out with you. So I guess I should set expectation that this will likely be a video that has things that you need to take with a grain of salt, because this is me thinking through a principle. But I do think there's merit in talking through what I'm thinking in front of camera, so that possibly for some people out there, you can see how I think and try to mimic a thinking pattern that I might have. And then for others, you can correct me where I'm wrong. I'm definitely not going to be correct in everything that I say or think here. But I kind of have a thesis on how I want to go about this video, which is number one, I want to talk about the first proverb and how to correlate that to business. Number two is I want to talk about faith, boldness, and humility, and how to ask God to bless your business in that same perspective. But then something about these two concepts, my heart is telling me I want to find a way to combine these, which is going to be something that I have to think through. So let's start with the proverb: man thinks, man plans, God laughs. And I think in business, there's no more apparent thing to have to talk about than this, because every business coach talks about how you have to set goals. Every business coach actually sells you on pre-made goals right out of the gate. If you're even starting in business, you have goals of $10,000 a month, $100,000 a month, $1 million a month, $250,000, whatever the next pre-made number is that everyone cares about in your industry. That is your goal. It happens to everyone in business. And I think that the reason God laughs at that is kind of threefold. Number one is that these goals aren't unique, and your journey in business is supposed to be. And you're taking your unique self, the unique imagery of God that you're made in, and the unique journey that God has in mind for you. And you're taking all of that uniqueness and you're saying, I would rather conform to the industry and the goals of the industry, which I think is laughable on its own. It's actually sad. It would be, if I had to picture that or imagine that, it's laughable at how ridiculous it is, but I'm sure it's saddening to God to think about the fact that He wants you to be your unique, I'll say the word snowflake, where you're not like anything else in the world, and your business isn't. But for some reason, we would rather be the same paper airplane folded the same way as every other business so that we can hit the same goals as every other business. And I think that is laughable, number one. But number two is it's laughable because it's almost like a child telling a parent, I want to be a customer service rep for Yelp when I grow up. Something that is so non-bold, like we'll talk about in a second with faith and boldness and humility. We're saying we want to be something so not great, but we have no idea what we can be. And so we want to be something so not great because we think realistically that's all we're capable of being. And I think, again, God would look at that with a saddened heart, but also laughing at that naivety, whatever the right word is there, at how naive we're being, at how ignorant we are to really the image, again, that we're made. I think the thing that's been on my mind constantly is how made in the image of God we are, and how unique we are. And everything that I've seen in the business world is really just trying to strip away that uniqueness. I think it's sad to try to do the exact same thing that everyone else in the space does and try to have the same goals that everyone else in the space does when we all have different backgrounds, different things that we're gifted with. When we all have different backgrounds, we all have different gifts in the image of God that we're made in, different ways to flourish. I think it's silly for us to say, let's all try to do the same thing and let's all have the same goals. And I think if I really thought about that, it's not even a laughing thing. It's actually just really sad. It's sad to think that at the core of it, what we're doing is we're taking whatever industry we're in, whether or not you're in online business, brick and mortar, if you own gyms, if you are a chiropractor that owns practices, it doesn't really matter. You see what's working in your industry, and you would rather make that what you hold faith to, and those processes and those systems and those marketing funnels. You'd rather hold faith to that working than you would rather hold faith to God helping you flourish in the journey that you feel He called you to. It's almost like stories in the Old Testament about God saying to Abraham, or Abram at the time, I'm going to do this with you and you're going to have a multitude of nations, yet Abram still feels the need to pimp out his wife. It's almost like Israel knowing that God had made a promised land, given them a promised land, but not having the faith in God to actually pursue the promised land. I think we just constantly try to make our own way and find these idols, even in ways that we don't realize we're idolizing. And so, again, guys, this is raw. This is me talking through stuff. You can probably say my brain's pretty ADD right now. This is almost like a journal entry that you guys are just seeing how I'm thinking about something that's been on my brain for probably the last 3 days. I don't know. It's something that's really been deep in my heart. The fact that, and I haven't even really thought about the fact until now that I'm idolizing what works in the industry and holding faith to that more than I'm holding faith to God. I want you to think about what your goals are every day. And goals probably isn't the right word to use here. Let's say I want you to think about what you're working on every single day and the outcome of what you're trying to actually produce. And it all probably comes down to signing a client or 2 or 3. And if we just had faith in asking God boldly with humility, kind of like Jacob did, bless me. And I'm not saying realistically God's going to bless your business and bless you financially. That would be very prosperity gospel. Again, I'm trying to think out what I'm trying to say here. I think the main thing that really struck me in the car that I'm having a trouble verbating is that I don't ask God for amazing, wondrous things. There's a Ty Lopez clip I was watching the other day, and he talked about this Napoleon Bonaparte story. And I don't know if the story's true. I looked into it, but if you haven't seen this clip, and Ty is blowing up on social media again, so you probably have. But in short, this private goes up to Napoleon Bonaparte and says, "Sire, give me an island." And Napoleon says, "What have you done to deserve an island?" And the private says, "I fought bravely for you." And really what it comes down to in this story is the guy says, "I don't have much merit to ask for this other than the fact that I fought bravely for you." But it's such a big request that Napoleon Bonaparte, in the story at least, whether that's true or not, I couldn't find. But he signs the title to a plot of land or an island to this private, and the generals are blown away. They say, "Why did you do that?" And he says, "Because of the magnitude of the request he gave me, he honored me." And I think about then the story of Jacob wrestling with God. And if you're Muslim or Jewish, by the way, I would ask you, he's wrestling with God. Who do you think that human body that he's wrestling with is? Who do you think the person he's wrestling with is? I'll give you a hint. His initials are JC. He's a really cool guy. You should get to know him. But he's wrestling with God and says, after he wins, and I think it's so cool that God wrestles with us. And God, in this case, example, blows one strike to Jacob's hip, and Jacob is forever, I don't think can use that leg or is somehow forever injured. God could take us out whenever he wants, but he wants to wrestle with us, almost like a lion wrestling with his cub, or a father wrestling with his son. He wants to wrestle with us, and he wants to give us the win. And he does that with Jacob, and Jacob says something so bold after. He says, "Bless me." And God does. And I think about Solomon, and Solomon could have asked for anything, and he asked for wisdom, which number one is really cool and creative, but number two is super bold, asking the God of the universe, "Give me your wisdom." I think there is so much to take out of the fact that he asked for something so big. I mean, would you, if you were wrestling with God, going back to Jacob, would you ask him with that amount of boldness, "Bless me"? I see that, and I think to myself, like, I would not have the courage, I was going to say balls, I would not have the cojones, if you will, to ask for that. And I don't look at God, the God of the universe, every single day. I was driving on my way to work. I have a 25-minute drive to the office, to the studio. It's the coolest drive, and I never have a problem with it because I can overlook farmland and trees, over bridges, just vast amounts of water, and I see birds flying and deer running and such, and I just feel the creation of God. It's in Romans, the handiwork of God. I just see it every single day, and I see the magnitude of his creativity and sovereignty, and I just don't look at God as the God that created all of that. Sometimes, a lot of times, I look at God as someone who is smaller than that. And that's like the small image or frame that I put him in. But if I recognize that I'm talking in a direct channel through Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit in me, if I recognize that I have a direct line to the King of the universe, I probably wouldn't ask for small things. There's a line in scripture, and I'm going to paraphrase here. Christ says, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you'd be able to tell that mountain to move over there. And I think most people read that line and they take it. I actually remember I was in a Bible study once, and someone said, how do you take that? And it's pretty obvious that means if you just had a little bit of faith, you'd be able to do wondrous, amazing things. But I actually genuinely think that part of that, I don't think there is an analogy that doesn't hold literal truth in anything Christ ever says. And I think I know it sounds crazy, but I think that's kind of the point. I think realistically, if we had faith the size of a mustard seed, we'd be able to tell a mountain to move. I think Christ was saying that because no one reads it thinking that that'd be possible, but it would be possible if we just had the faith. And I know it sounds crazy. I understand that, but I think that's the point that Christ is trying to make. I think realistically, when we're talking to the God of the universe and creation, the God of that created time, the God that told the fundamentals of physics, and the God that even gravity obeys. I think if we were realizing the magnitude of the God that we were talking to, we'd probably, number one, be much more humble and approach with much more humility. But number two, we'd probably be able to ask for bigger things without thinking that they're big. Because realistically, example given, if you're asking God to help you make a few $1,000s for rent this month. There's 100% merit to asking for things that are big to you and being persistent about it. There's stories in the Bible, very many stories about persistency. I think it was a corrupt judge or just a normal judge being asked for justice over and over and over. And in that story, the judge eventually gave justice. And Christ says, if you're persistent with a just judge, the Father who is justice, if you are persistent with him, how much more swiftly and just will he be? And so there's definitely something to be said about persistently asking for things that you need. But I think, what if we just also thought, what about asking for things that are marvelous? And I'm not asking, and amazing, and I'm not saying that from like a financial perspective. I'm not saying go and ask for $1 million today. God, help me make $1 million in my business. But what if we asked God to really move in our business and ask the King of everything, the King of the world, the universe, again, the King that created time, the King of kings. What if we asked him, the King that kings trembled toward, what if we asked him to move in our business to help other people? Or what if we asked him to use our business to spread the word of the gospel in the online business world, or in our community, or in however he can? What if we asked for massive, amazing things? I just don't think that I've ever been that bold in my prayers and asks of God. And I think and then I thought of specifically the maturity of a Christian. And as you become a Christian, I don't want to say you become more mellow. There's a certain sense of lack of childlike innocence that I think I see in a lot of the mature Christian friends that I have. Almost like that's something that's supposed to happen. And I think in many senses of Christianity, I've become a little more tame. But I think about having childlike innocence. And I think when a child says, I want to be an astronaut, that is almost to an extent what Christ is kind of partially saying. There's a lot of things he means with childlike innocence, but I think that's partially an aspect we're supposed to take. Approach asking God in prayer for things with childlike innocence. Children wouldn't say, hey, can you help me do this very small thing? Children don't tell their dads, their fathers, I want to be a customer support rep and take customer support calls for Yelp all day. They say that they want to be an astronaut, or that they want to save the world, or something insanely audacious. And there's such innocence to that. And I think as we grow up in the world and we start to live to the confinements of the world, and it makes me think, and I'll paraphrase this Steve Jobs line, which is when you realize that the world is made up of rules that people like you and I made, you start to live outside of those rules, or you start to realize you can live outside of those rules. And to take that even a step further, I think when you realize that there is God who wants everything for you, and then there's the devil who wants you to think that's not possible. The devil is going to try to make it seem like these audacious things aren't possible, and you're just going to start to live this very mediocre life. And so I think, if anything, the thing that I felt, in my heart today, you can say that I felt called to at least talk about this in front of camera, is I personally want to make a better effort to live more bold. I want to live specifically, I want to pray for much bigger, much bolder things with the childlike innocence of thinking it's possible. I want to approach that with faith that God will live through his promises. And if my bold asks are things that align with his desires, knocking the door will be open, seeking you will find. If I ask bold, courageous asks that are aligned with what God wants, I'm going to approach those asks with faith, or I'm going to try to approach those asks with faith. And I will do it with the humility of knowing that I am a flawed sinner and I am dust, but I'm also going to deal with the boldness of knowing that I am clothed in the righteousness of Jesus Christ. I don't know, there's a lot of tension in all these different points that I think it probably needs to be carried, and I'm probably not the best person to verbiate all of this. I think part of what I want to do on this YouTube channel is talk about all of the things that I think about, and if anything, just inspire conversation maybe down in the comments about any of this. If you have thoughts, feel free to comment down below what your thoughts are. If you have disagreement, I would love to know what it is, because there's nothing that I'm saying that I think is something you can't disagree with. I'll put it that way. This is just me thinking and speaking out my thoughts. And so I would love to see what you guys think down below in the comments. If this inspired you to do anything differently or think about something differently, I would love to see that in the comments down below. If you want to watch more of these videos, then feel free to go to our YouTube channel, where we have plenty of Christian/business content. I would love for you to check it out and hopefully enjoy. Until next time, I will see you tomorrow. Happy hunting.